You can rent a Turo car almost everywhere in the United States. In fact, you can rent one in a lot of places throughout the entire world. From California to Texas to Hawaii, even Canada, you can rent a Turo car. But there is one major state that's excluded from this list, and that's New York. The state of New York has nearly 19.5 million people. New York has tens of millions of visitors every single year. In fact, in 2019, pre-COVID-19, there were 66 million people that visited the state. So in a state that has a ton of people, a lot of travel and tourism is home to one of the largest cities in the world. And in the case of New York City in particular, a lot of people don't own cars. You would think that New York would be the perfect market for Turo. And you would probably be right in theory. But the problem is that Turo is actually banned from New York. You see, back in the day, before Turo was known as relay rides. And in the infancy of what was to become Turo, relay rides actually did operate in the state of New York. But after a lengthy investigation in 2014, the Department of Financial Services, otherwise known as DFS, ordered relay rides to pay a $200,000 fine and required them to cease operations in the state immediately. And that is really the beginning of the entire saga that caused Turo to not be able to operate in the state of New York today in 2022. Now, you may be wondering, well, what did relay rides do that required them to pay this huge fine and to also cease operations in New York State? So let me explain. The DFS, or the Department of Financial Services in New York, is the regulatory body that oversees insurance in the entire state. And like most states, insurance in the state of New York has to meet certain requirements in order for it to be considered a valid form of insurance that meets state's guidelines. Now, for the most part, the insurance requirements that you have to meet in the state of New York are pretty on par with the insurance requirements throughout the entire country. You have to meet the minimum liability coverage in order to meet state guidelines and thus not get a ticket or not get in trouble if you were to get into an accident. And of course, if you finance a vehicle, there may be other aspects of the equation that need to be taken into account, because a lot of times financiers for vehicles require different types of insurance as well. As a driver, you had to meet these minimum insurance requirements, but as an insurance provider, you had to be certified and licensed by the state of New York. So the insurance that is offered throughout the state has to be approved by the DFS. If it's not approved by the DFS, if it's not licensed by the DFS, then it's not considered a reputable or approved insurance provider. And this is where things start to get messy. You see, Turo offers insurance-like solutions to their guests and to their hosts. They do this through the form of protection packages. And how it works is whenever you sign up for Turo as either a guest or a host, you have the option to buy a protection package. And whenever you buy a protection package, you are basically buying coverage for the vehicle in case something was to happen. That insurance or protection package is oftentimes provided by a third-party insurance provider, and it's given to you through Turo. And where relay rides got in trouble with the state of New York was because of the fact that they were technically selling insurance through their protection packages, but this insurance was not officially licensed by the DFS, and thus it was not considered to be a valid form of insurance per the state of New York. Because of this, whenever relay rides was starting to take off in the state of New York, there was a lot of debate on how the insurance aspect of the equation would work, because of the fact that the DFS didn't recognize Turo's insurance protection packages as valid licensed insurance. What was going to happen if a Turo host had their car wrecked? Would it fall under the Turo host personal insurance? Would Turo step in and their protection package play a role? Things got really messy really quickly, and there were a lot of hypotheticals brought into the equation here, trying to determine the answer to the question of what happens if a relay rides guest wrecks a car in the state of New York. And because of the fact that relay rides isn't seen as a licensed insurance company, would the claim and would the damage fall on the host's personal insurance? And after this lengthy investigation was conducted, ultimately the DFS in the state of New York determined that yes, it would fall onto the host's insurance because of the fact that relay rides was not seen as a valid form of insurance. So ultimately, in this scenario, even if you opted in for relay rides protection packages, you as a host would be liable if there was an accident, and your personal insurance would be deemed the primary insurance provider rather than relay rides, which is really how it's supposed to be per the Turo or relay rides terms of service. But here's where things start to get a little bit more messy and even more interesting. You see, whenever the state of New York determined that relay rides was not a licensed form of insurance, and thus it was not a valid form of insurance insurance, they simultaneously determined that relay rides claim that if you decide to rent your car through relay rides, you would be covered with $1 million worth of insurance. They deemed that that statement was false advertising because it simply was not true, because you would not be covered with $1 million worth of insurance. Because of the fact that per New York state rulings, you wouldn't be covered with $1 million worth of insurance because your personal insurance would be primary, not relay rides insurance. This is the entire cause of Turo's mess that they're ultimately still dealing with today. The state of New York deemed their insurance to be invalid because it was unlicensed. Because of the fact that it would not be primary in the case of an accident, it was then causing their claims of giving hosts $1 million worth of insurance to be a fraudulent claim. These are kind of the three main points that ultimately caused relay rides to get fined $200,000 and to be kicked out of the state of New York as a whole. Well, fast forward time, and in 2015, relay rides changed their name to Turo. Then in 2017, I joined the Turo platform. Fast forward to today in April of 2022, and you can now rent a Turo car in 56 different countries, but you still cannot rent a Turo car in the state of New York. But for a brief period of time, this actually wasn't the case. In summer of 2021, Turo in the state of New York had announced that they had made up a negotiation to where Turo could expand into the state, but with very, very specific limitations. You see, in order to expand into the state of New York, you had to be a Turo commercial host. Now, you may be wondering what a Turo commercial host is, so let me explain. So a Turo commercial host is basically a rental car agency that operates through Turo, kind of like a marketing and technology arm. Sort of think about it as not every host with an LLC is a commercial host, but every commercial host has an LLC. Confusing, I know, but really all you need to know is that a commercial host is basically just a rental car agency that's being independently operated. They're using Turo as a booking system, and they aren't using Turo for their claims or for their fee processes or for their policies. They're really just using Turo as a marketing and booking arm. So if you are a commercial host, you have to have an LLC, you have to have a commercial insurance coverage, and you have to meet other requirements that normal hosts like me and you don't have to meet. So in the summer of 2021, Turo announced that commercial hosts would be going back to the state of New York. And this was a big deal. Whenever I was doing research for this video, there were a lot of news briefs, a lot of articles about the fact that Turo was coming back to the Big Apple. But unfortunately, this was sort of short-lived because just about a month ago, Turo announced that they would be closing down their commercial host program, and thus these hosts that were going back to New York would no longer be able to operate through the Turo platform. So once again, Turo is no longer in the state of New York because of the end of their commercial host program. Now, in my opinion, I think that ending the commercial host program was the smart thing to do. It really allowed for Turo to have more uniformity and just more consistency throughout the platform. I also think that in a way, the commercial host program was cannibalizing their own business. It was just all around a smart thing to do. But of course, a negative repercussion of that is the fact that New York is no longer a state that Turo's in. In fact, as I'm recording this video today, if you look at a Turo map, you will see tons of cars available to rent in New Jersey, right on the border of New York. You will also see a lot of other cars available to rent in other surrounding states, but you will not see any cars in the entire state of New York. And ultimately, whenever it comes down to it, it comes down to this insurance fiasco that happened back in 2013. Now, ultimately, the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I know that there has been discussions on my channel and on the internet as a whole about the entire idea of banning peer-to-peer car sharing. It's something that was recently discussed in Hawaii, and if I was a betting person, I would be willing to bet that this will not be the last time that we hear of a state that's looking to ban the platform. The reality is that peer-to-peer car sharing shakes things up, and one thing that corporations do not like is somebody coming in and shaking up their profit centers. So it's no surprise and it's no shock that there are some states looking to ban these types of platforms. Though I do agree that in the instance of New York versus Hawaii, it is definitely a different set of circumstances. But I do think that it's incredibly interesting that Turo is not in the entire state of New York, especially considering the fact that the city of New York is so incredibly large, has so many tourists, and would do probably very, very well with Turo. So I wanted to make this video giving you guys some background on this because I think it's really interesting, and I think that not that many people know the full story. So like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.